Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join Mark and I for this summer 2021 update. I just want to add a few additional housekeeping announcements that we are expecting almost around 700 to 800 people joining us for this event this afternoon. And as you can imagine, there are going to be so many questions that some of you have. So if you could just refrain from entering any questions into the Q&A until Mark and I have finished our presentation, because we may have covered or answered some of those questions before that. Also, please make use of the group chat to just share your ideas and have a general discussion amongst yourselves. And we have received quite a few questions from you from the pre-submitted form that I will share some feedback with after the presentation. So once the presentation has finished and I've submitted and shared with you those common questions and answers, then please do feel free to ask any other questions that you may have. We're just conscious that we want to try and get through to as many of you as we can. So I will now hand over to Mark. Mark and I are going to share the presentation, and Mark is going to just go through the overview of what you can expect from today's session.
Super. Thanks, Nick. I hope everyone can hear me okay. My name is Mark Heslop. I'm the A-Level Maths subject partner. Both Nick and I joined Pearson at Christmas. Nick is the GCSE Maths subject partner. So we were right there in the thick of it last year. So we appreciate the stress of this period, really. Okay, so our agenda for today, we're going to have a quick look at some of the key dates and the deadlines. We're going to have a look at our support for UK qualifications, the international qualifications, and a quick overview of the assessment materials. So, just on the context, just to remind you of how we got to where we are, and I'm aware it's kind of information overload at the moment. So we're just going to try and boil things down to the absolute basics and just to give you as much reassurance as we can, really. So basics of this year is that students will receive grades awarded and returned by teachers. But the important point is it's kind of based on the content that they've been taught. You know, the issue was really, it's not that exams themselves are not COVID safe, they're by their very nature socially distanced, but it's that different students had a different level of disruption and missed different amounts of content. So that's why the exams in principle were cancelled to go for an alternative assessment model. So pupils will only be assessed on what they have been taught. That's the absolute key point on this one. No algorithm will be used, unlike in the 2020 series, and teachers will be able to draw on a sort of a range of evidence when determining grades, and this could include the optional use of questions provided by the exam board. So you've seen on our website hopefully that we've got mapping grids, which I'll show a demonstration of one of those later in the presentation. We've got the topic-based effectively additional assessment materials with the mark scheme and the marking grid that's associated with those. These are optional. You'll also have seen that material has been released to students. So only the questions are being released to students, and I can clarify that actually the mark schemes for these and effectively the examiner's reports that go along with them are not being released to students. So students could also be assessed on coursework, not really applicable for us, but this is a general presentation. We have to go through all the detail. Other work completed as part of the pupil's course, such as essays or in-class tests, and it's, you know, in terms of assessing it, it's thinking about the quality of that assessment. You know, under what circumstances was it carried out? Was it carried out in, you know, good test conditions? Was it carried out just students doing work at home? And it's part of having an emphasis on that will help you determine whether to include it in your body of evidence. So exams are providing guidance for teachers on their website. So you've seen we've got marking guidance up on our website already, hopefully. And the key date really is that teachers need to submit grades to the exam boards by the 18th of June. So that's one of the key dates. The precise mechanism for that is currently being decided, so do not worry about that so much at the moment. Results days for GCSE and A-level, and some vocational qualifications will take place on the 10th of August for the GCE and vocational, and the 12th of August for the vocational qualifications. So let's skip forward. So in terms of timelines that we're working with, well, we need to, so we've got 26th of March, the grade descriptors. I'm just going to skip down to here that the 19th of April was when the UK grading exemplification was released by, prior to that by JCQ, but released by the boards with more subject-specific wording on it. So deadline of today is 26th of April for entry deadline for private candidates, and a deadline that you have at the end of this week, or I should say that your senior management team have at the end of this week, is the deadline for the centre quality assurance policy submission via the pro forma on the centre admin portal. But that's for your senior management team to be concerned with. You only need to submit one per centre, and it's not that if your centre works with all the different boards, they need to submit to all the different boards. It only gets submitted once. And then, as we've said, the 10th of August for the AS and A-level results and relevant level 3 results, and then the 12th of August for the GCSE and the corresponding level 2 results. So, just onto the JCQ guidance, I'm going to hand over to Nick to have a quick chat with you about that one.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the JCQ guidance then. So if we skip forward here, so on the 26th of March, we had the determining grades released from JCQ. So this is the main guide that UK centres are going to have to follow as you arrive at your grades for your learners this summer. So do make sure that you visited the website and that you've downloaded your editable centre policy, the assessment record sheet that we'll talk about in some questions that have come in a bit later on, the head of department checklist, if that is relevant to you, and also the grade descriptors. We have our grade descriptors on as part of our summer 2021 support as well, so you can download those from our website as well. So we've shared the link to the top 10 important things to note, and the link is available here. Of course, you can download this presentation within around an hour afterwards from this event. And the following slides that I'm going to show you here summarise some of the key details. So the quality assurance process timeline, that's outlined as Mark has just gone through, and there are 3 stages to this quality assurance to start with here. So each centre needs to complete their centre policy by completing their summary and confirming the key details of their policy. Stage 2, there will be virtual centre visits conducted where there is some indication that some further support may be required. And step 3, there will be some targeted and random sampling by the awarding organisations of some of those centre policies and the evidence that underpins the submitted grades. This will all be done virtually as well. The quality assurance process will be a supportive process and will construct appropriate processes to underpin the determination of the grades. So these are internal and external elements to the process. So the internal quality assurance just ensures that every centre must produce that centre policy, and this can be done by choosing to adopt the pre-populated template. Only one policy needs to be produced and submitted by the portal, which you can find on the Edexcel online via your Edexcel online account. The policy must provide a summary of the centre's approach to assessment and quality, assuring the centre determine grades that they are awarding to their students based on the evidence that they have produced. So for every centre, the head of centre is required to complete the summary of centre policy form and to upload the centre policy as an attachment prior to this submission. And the submission of this centre policy must be completed by the 30th of April. So guidance on grading, the heads of centre should ensure that the students have the opportunity to show the full breadth of their knowledge and understanding in each subject based on what they have been taught. It's important that grades represent a holistic and objective judgment based on the evidence. Evidence should be used consistently across the class or cohort where possible. I know that the assessment record calls this the subject cohort, so making sure that across the whole of your maths cohort, wherever possible, evidence should be consistent. And the evidence can be of different types and can, of course, come from across the course of study. So please make sure you and other members of your department have seen and used the subject-specific support guides on our website, and that you've accessed the Pearson Professional Development Academy training resources. And again, I'm going to go through that in our maths-specific support at the end of the presentation. So arriving at a grade follows 5 processes. So we need to first of all consider what has been taught, then collect your evidence, and then evaluate the quality of the evidence. So that's the main kind of first 3 steps to consider when grading. Step 4 is to establish whether the proposed range of evidence is suitable for all students. And then step 5 is to assign the grade. So the window for these teacher assessed grade submissions opens on the portal from the 26th of May, and the final submission date is the 18th of June. So on the 19th of April, we released some grade exemplifications to support teachers in assigning grades this summer, and we'll be using historic exam responses from candidates to show the mid-grade performance for each spec. The grade descriptors that have been created for GCSE and AS and A-level describe the mid-grade performance. So A-level grade descriptors exist for A, C and E. So characteristics of performance at the grade A or grade B borderline are included, as well as having the grade descriptors A, C and E for AS level. GCSE, we have grade descriptors for 2, 4, 5, 6 and 8. And the off-qual descriptors for 8, 5 and 2 have been used as the starting point for these. The characteristics of performance at the grade 4-3 borderline are included. Each awarding organisation has created grading exemplification, as we just mentioned. They came out on the 19th of April, and you can find those on our support page on the main website. The grading exemplification uses student responses from the historical examination scripts, as I've just said, and the exemplification gives examples of the standards that you'll use to make grade judgments. So the use of data, one source of data which is available to centres is tracking systems, and they provide target grades or predicted grades based on assessments, input and data modelling. As the policy direction is that the final grade is derived solely based on performances produced by students, a grade derived based on a predicted trajectory is not permitted. So we're not asking centres to use these tracking systems on projected or target grades. So used appropriately, data on historical student and centre performance can help support this process and the QA process for assigning grades. But the purpose of reviewing data on past performance is not to attempt to determine a student or a centre's outcomes, but one as a source of evidence from an exam series which operated as normal, that teachers can be informed using their professional judgment on the level of attainment achieved by their students. So centres should be aware of the distribution of grades awarded to students in previous series. However, grading judgment should not be driven by this data. Historical grade data should only be considered as a final checkpoint once those grade judgments have been made. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to talk to you about the additional assessment materials.
Okay, so you've seen on our website that we've got the additional assessment materials. The mark schemes in the examiner report section are still locked so that only teachers can access, students can access the questions. So awarding organisations existing assessment materials, including past papers and examiners' results, will be available as normal. In addition, the following materials have been made available to centres. So on the 31st of March, we made available additional assessment materials, including sets of questions, mark schemes, mapping grids, and on the 12th of April, additional support materials, including exemplar responses and links to other information which will help with using and making marking these assessment materials. So a common question we get asked is, what materials have been used in these ones? So they include, for instance, for A-level, we've got the specimen papers, the sample assessment materials, the mock sets 1 and 2, and the live exam series. For GCSE, so I think we've got a body of about 250 questions just for A-level maths. For GCSE, it's literally thousands of questions. There was concerns from people about, if the live exam papers from 2020 are to remain locked, but the questions have been used in the additional assessment materials. Isn't that going to cause an issue? We don't believe it will. I mean, the students would have to complete 250 questions to even stand a chance of covering bits of each of those exam papers. And it was only samples of questions that were used from each of the papers that were used in the additional assessment materials. For GCSE, they've got very little chance of covering entire exam papers just due to the fact that there was thousands of questions. That's because there's been a lot more exam series at GCSE. Any student that's going to sit down and do 250 exam questions is probably going to do quite well anyway, regardless of whether they did them or not. They would supplement them with other revision instead. So in terms of the additional assessment materials, so they're a qualification-specific set of questions covering key knowledge, understanding and skills. The materials available for GCSE, AS and A-level, with the exception of art and design. They draw from a variety of exam questions and from a range of papers. They do not cover any non-examination assessment components. The number, breadth and depth of the material will vary between subjects and reflect the characteristics of each qualification, e.g. where there is only one exam component, there will be fewer materials than for a subject which is usually assessed entirely by examination. However, the assessments will draw on the equivalent of effectively 3 sets worth of exam notional material as a minimum. So support materials may also include the past examiner reports, marked examples of student work from past papers. So you'll see them in terms of the marking exemplars and support the marking of student work. So links to other information which will help with using and marking these assessment materials. So I will move forward to the next slide. So in terms of reasonable adjustments, so special educational needs coordinators, SENCOs, SEND leaders and assessors have previously been advised to continue to process online applications as if examinations were taking place this summer. So this will formalise the arrangements for the students' assessments and will ensure consistency with the Equality Act of 2010. So the awarding organisations will continue to provide their usual support to centres with advice and guidance on how to modify the additional assessment material resources for use in classroom assessments. And awarding organisations recognise that the additional assessment materials are being provided in a different way to past examination materials, and that these may present an issue for some teachers and indeed students with visual impairment. And our advice on that is in these cases, centres should contact the awarding organisations who will aim to provide extra support and guidance wherever we can. The appeals process is quite an important one this year. So the arrangements for awarding organisations to students in summer 21 include internal and external quality assurance measures which aim to ensure that on results day, students are issued with fair and consistent grades that have been objectively reached. So thinking about that, just have an internal conversation with your team about how are you going to ensure objectivity in things like marking. So one centre suggested that they were going to anonymise work and they were actually all going to mark each other's work rather than their own students, and that way it would remove any hint of bias in the marking. So sharing information with students about the evidence being used as part of the centre's grade determination process is important, and I can't stress this highly enough, and should help to avoid issues that may otherwise arise when results are issued. So by all means, share your policy, communicate with your students, communicate with your parents about what the process that is being used to award the grades at that centre. So students will be able to appeal their grade. A student who is unhappy with their grade will first ask their centre to check whether an administrative or procedural error has been made. And where a centre does identify an error in the grade submitted to the exam board, it can submit a revised grade and a rationale for the board to consider. If the exam board is satisfied with the rationale, it will issue a revised grade. When a centre does not believe an error has been made, a student can ask the centre to appeal to the exam board on their behalf. So the centre will then submit the student's appeal to the exam board and provide evidence on which its judgment has been made. The exam board will consider whether, in its view, the grade reflected an appropriate exercise of academic judgment. So if the exam board judges that it did not, the exam board will determine the grade, and that the evidence determine the grade that the evidence would support, and the exam board will also check the centre had followed its own process. There is an off-call consultation out at the moment on the appeals process. I'd urge you to engage with that one. I understand it closes on the 5th of May, and that's available on the Ofqual website. But the idea of the principle of sharing the information with students about the evidence being collected and how the grades being determined is probably one of the most important things that you can take away from this session. I'm now going to hand back to Nick.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, so we're going to just go through some different communication avenues and the support that we have on offer generally, and then Mark will go through the mock service and key dates, and then we'll talk about our maths-specific support that we have for you. So in terms of the information and support, we've already mentioned the Professional Development Academy, where you will find ongoing training, videos and meetings. Please make sure that you're signed up to attend those events. The link is in this presentation, and also I'm going to refer to it again in a few minutes. But the support and guidance trainings are highly sought after, and they will provide pre-records and downloadable guides. The support has been available since the 31st of March, and it's being expanded upon, almost daily at the moment. And we're releasing in full for UK qualifications by the 19th, so online events have been uploaded, and the international qualifications will be available from the 4th of May. So there are some screenshots at the bottom where you can see here. So following this link will take you to the pages that you can see in the live training. I think we're just waiting for the upload of the guiding to grading your summer grades to go live anytime now, as that one took place a couple of days ago. So the full support guides can be found on the Summer 2021 support page. Obviously, there is more information on the Ofqual website, and as I've said in previous Emporium emails, and the one that you should have received today, that please sign up to receive regular quals updates through the qualifications bulletins, and I'm going to mention those and share some links with you after the presentation. So I'm just going to hand back to Mark so he can talk to you about the mock service, key dates and timelines.
Okay, so some of you have signed up to this summer's marking service, where effectively you'll be sent papers, they will be sent to us for marking, and then sent back to you with a mark. They won't be ascribed a grade this summer. So the mock service for 2021, key dates and deadlines. So a number of teachers have been in contact to ask about using the mock service to provide support teacher assessed grades for GCSE and also A-level. We've created a timeline with key dates if you're using that one, if you're considering using the mock service to support your teacher assessed grades. So key documents, so do download the key dates and deadlines for summer 2021 mocks. I believe they use the 2020 series of papers. We've also created a short guide to using the mock service to inform the teacher assessed grades, and download your guide to using the mock service 2021, like we've said, and the booking window and the mock exam papers list. So in terms of supporting students, parents and carers, it's a stressful time for you in teaching. It's going to be an incredibly stressful time for parents and students. So I cannot emphasize enough just that idea of slightly over communicating with parents about what you're doing and how parents can respond to either to yourselves or the formal process. So do take a look at our student parent carers webpage. Send that on to your parents of your students. On here, you'll find a video and a letter from Hayley White, our assessment director, explaining how students' grades will be determined this summer and the support we're providing to schools and colleges, and a link to the student timeline for summer 2021. There's also a feedback form so students, parents and carers can get in touch should they need further help and support. And there's also a link to the Ofqual infographic that explains in a visual way how grades will be awarded this summer. Please do encourage people to sign up for our parents and carers newsletters for the latest information and support. And I'm now going to hand back to Nick, who's going to do some subject-specific information for you on GCSE, and I'll take over with the A-level side in a little while.
Great, thank you. So this part of the presentation is now focusing mainly on what we have on offer for you for maths specifically. So if we look, I'll take over the GCSE quals, of course. So for GCSE Maths, you'll obviously be aware of the additional assessment materials. Within this, here is a screenshot for you. So within the assessment materials for centres, you have an overview document as a PDF that will link out to all of the support on offer. The grade descriptors are also in there. You'll also find 10 individual topic tests, both at foundation tier and at higher tier, and these are separated into the algebra, number, geometry, probability topics, and they're about 50 marks each. There are some guidance on the initial pages on each of those. The skills mapping grids, which lots of you have been talking about, and includes all of the performance data and assessment objectives and student performance, etc. And you'll also find the grading exemplification within this tab as well. So these materials you can just find quite simply under the Summer 2021 assessment materials for centres, and we've also created the blue cabinet on the main page of the Emporium, and you will also find them in there. We talked a lot about the locked and unlocked materials as this was happening a few weeks ago. So just to confirm that the documents that will remain locked are all of the past secure papers and the mark schemes for the additional assessment materials that we've just spoken about. We have this document that's in the Emporium, as you can see, an image of the blue cabinet that you need to click onto where you can find everything within there. So the things that will remain locked have the little padlocks next to them. So the unlocked materials have been the overview document and the individual topic tests, but again, not the mark schemes. For additional support, so above and beyond the initial support that was released as the GCSE team, we have also released your November 2020 shadow papers. We have also had Graham C. He's put together some additional topic tests for us of around 20 to 30 marks. They can be found in the Emporium cabinets. We have also released the sets 14, 15, 16 and 17 practice sets. They're in the Emporium and you can find those on the website. The themed papers have been very well received, especially across this time where teachers and centres are just looking for specific evidence. And thanks to Mel at Just Maths, she's created some lovely work solutions for us to check some exemplars. The skills mapping grids are available, and there are some diagnostic tests that you can also find. And again, that's within the Summer 2021 support cabinet, and you can see the little image of the cabinets within that. So for GCSE Statistics, again, similarly, we've released the additional assessment materials, including the grade descriptors and topic tests, both at the foundation and the higher tier. The skills mapping grids are available for both tiers and some grade exemplifications. And the overview document then will link out to all of those support materials as well. And again, you'll find all of this within the Emporium. The locked and unlocked materials, again, you will see on the locked document that we are keeping everything from June 2019 and November 2020 secure. The specimen papers and shadow papers will also be secure, but those overview documents, the mapping grids and the additional assessment topic tests, they have been unlocked to students, which you can see on the Students tab on the website. Talking of which, it looks a little bit like this. So students can see these topic tests for both the maths and the statistics, but again, no mark schemes. We found that it was important not to have the mark schemes, you know, so that students don't have the answers to the tests that will be available. So we decided across boards that that would not be released and that they would be under padlock. With that in mind, I'm just going to hand over to Mark now to talk about the A-level. I'm hoping that the slides are going to extend, Mark. I can see that they're only going up to slide 29 at the moment. Just give us a second, Alan. I'm being photobombed by my daughter. I'm sorry, guys. Right, it does look like our slides have been cut off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with the
do this slightly differently. I'm not sure why that's happened. So we're on 29. I'm going to do a screen share directly from my laptop. I think it's a feature of working from home these days, guys, that we get photobombed by our children. And I should say, one of the important things that someone raised with me the other day, and it got highlighted to me this weekend, is in terms of if you're running internal assessments, it's important to think about what is your backup plan for where there are students missing. I'm sorry, I'm just giggling about my daughter coming in. It's kind of highlighted to me this weekend because my eldest daughter is at home this week and next week because her student bubble has burst. So it's important to think about, what is the backup plan, in terms of, have you got another set of assessments that you could put that student through that will give equal quality evidence? Or if a student actually does an assessment at home, the important thing that we've been asked to stress to you is, what is the quality of that assessment? Can you verify the conditions under which it was undertaken? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen to a window, and hopefully this will flip across to the PowerPoint window. I'm just going to redo that again. Okay, so I'm going to flip across that. Nick, can you just confirm that you can see that okay? Or if someone could just post in the chat for us that people can see that okay?
Yes, but I'm aware that my screen looks different to everybody else's. Just wait for someone in the chat if that's okay, everybody.
Okay, I'll keep going, and if someone in the chat shouts out there if they can't see it, then that's fine. So in terms of AS and A-level further math, they can see it. They've said good. Super. Okay, so we have additional assessment materials for AS and A-level maths, further maths and statistics. So we've got an overview document that links out to the support. We have the grade descriptors. They're exemplified at each grade. We have topic tests. We have the skills mapping grids. I'm going to demonstrate one of the skills mapping grids in a minute in case you haven't seen it. The November 2020 has been used in terms of A-level maths exemplars, so you need to view those on the Edexcel website and the Emporium. So this is where we've pulled apart the marking guidance and the examiner's comments into easy-to-use documents for you. Coming soon, we've got the November 2020 shadow papers. So they're coming through effectively. The A-level maths ones will be available tomorrow, with the rest filtering through later on after that. So we're doing November 2020 shadow papers for A-level maths, AS maths, AS level and A-level further maths, but only the pure option 1, so not the additional pure 2, the mechanics 2, and the further stats 2 and the further decision 2. They'll be available on the subject pages. In terms of other support, we've got A-level maths 2019 shadow papers, topic tests on the Emporium. There are also shadow versions of those. You can also use mock sets 1 and 2, and I should stress that the mock sets 1 and 2 and the shadow papers are locked on the Emporium. They're not available for students to download. A-level maths practice paper sets 1 to 3, and we've also got AS level and A-level maths practice paper sets A to J and A to Q for A-level maths. In terms of additional assessment materials for students, only the questions are actually being unlocked and not the actual papers, the mark schemes and papers themselves. And in terms of locked and unlocked materials, you can actually see the timescales here. But we've actually already mentioned those ones. What I am going to do now is swap over to one of a separate window in terms of effectively the content mapping grid. So you can see that. So this is where you can actually use the content mapping grid. If you're, for instance, pulling your own papers together, if you're actually adjusting a paper so that effectively your students are being put through, say, the 2020 series, but there's a couple of topics that you think they haven't covered, effectively you can use this. So we can actually select questions in here. So we can actually select and see the entirety of the 2020 series. And if on the A-level maths and A-level maths further maths side, we've got the option to basically hover over and have a quick look at the actual question itself if you're swapping it in and out. What you can then do is, excuse me, I should put that as a capital yes. Select these questions, some questions, so we could have that one, and that one, and we can add them to a paper, and it will actually pull these together with the performance data. It was suggested by a school of, how will I take adjusting papers into account? Well, we've got the performance data by grade here. You need to be a little bit more circumspect about the 2020 papers for things like further maths, where there was, in some cases, a very low cohort of entry. But someone asked me the other day about how do these relate to the actual grade boundaries themselves. And if you look, you can see that the grade boundaries are placed in between. So this is the sum of these would be the average candidate who got an A star, the average candidate who got an A, the average candidate who got a B. And you'll see that the actual grade boundaries are in between those. They're not exactly halfway. You're going to have to make it to a degree of judgment call yourselves if you start to adjust these papers. But you could, for instance, maybe remove one question. You can see what topics they have here, replace it with another question, and have a view as to how you might consider adjusting the grade boundaries. So if we add them to the paper, what we can then do is go to a data compile paper where it's actually pulled this information with the topics, etc. So I'm going to flip back to the presentation. Okay, and I'm actually going to hand over to Nick for the last part of it, and I'm sure Nick will tell me when she wants me to move the slides forward.
Yeah, so we're just having a quick look. I think you were sharing your whole screen there, Mark, rather than the actual window of the Excel spreadsheet. If you go back into share your screen and application window, would you mind just opening that spreadsheet again to see if people can see it a bit clearer?
Yeah, unfortunately, the reason why I did it that way is because the application window for the PowerPoint wouldn't actually pop up. So I will try it for the screen share on the
spreadsheet.
Yep. So that's just sharing the spreadsheet now. So hopefully people can see that a little bit clearer. I'm going to zoom in on that one myself.
Just going to check the chat to see if people can see that spreadsheet a bit better.
Mm-hmm. I think we have put a link in the actual downloads to actually download this from the Edexcel Maths website. You can download these for yourselves under the 2021 Secure Materials. Okay,
people are saying that it's better with that spreadsheet. So do you just want to quickly go over that again?
Yeah, I'll just
to show people a bit better. We've got a bit of time, so.
Yeah. Okay. So if you, like I said, if you can put a filter on here, and I am going to zoom in on that a little bit more. Bear with me 1 second. So I can put a filter here and say I'm going to look at the 2019 series. We can scroll up. So here we have the 2019. So there is question 1, question 2, question 3. We've got the performance data, and if you were to gather this data together, you would see that the sum of all these values here would be the average performance of a grade A star candidate. So if I want to select a question, put yes into that one, and when I click yes, it's going to add that to the summary data. So maybe I just wanted to, I'll select all bar we'll have effectively that last question. And now I'm going to actually select, maybe I didn't like that last question, and then maybe I want something from the 2020 series. I'll just click add to paper on those. Get rid of those. And then maybe I want to actually do the 2020 series. And I think, okay, right, maybe I like this question here in relation to it. You can have filter by the topics as well. I can type yes in here, add to paper. And when I go in the data to compile the paper, you'll see that it's got those 2019 questions and the 2020, and you've got the performance data of those questions. I'm going to stress we do only have performance data for questions that have been sat as live papers. Is that okay, Nick? You're keeping an eye on the chat a little bit?
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye. We've just had a couple of people just ask if you could go back and have a look at the A-level slides. I'm just going to go. I can actually push
if you push it from your end.
Let me have a look where we got to. Oh, I think that's where we lost it, wasn't it? The slideshow that we've got uploaded doesn't have your A-level one. So if you go into, can we try and share your screen again?
Yep.
Just to see if we can get a better.
let's see if it will actually let share. Now I'm going to have to share my entire screen and then I'll flip to the presentation.
Yeah, let's see if that works a bit better.
Okay, so bear with me 1 second, guys. Okay. So I'm going to flip back to the A-level materials. Hopefully people should be able to see that. Now we'll flip back to the presentation. Well, we should say there's a little bit of delay between when we broadcast and when you receive it. So if there's a little bit of pregnant pause, it's when we're just waiting for somebody to shout something out in the chat that they can actually see it. But just give me a shout, Nick, if you want me to move forwards or backwards with the slides.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to see what we can see. I don't know if Mark and our technical can have a look while he's behind the scenes. Okay, I can see.
Shall we just run forward to the end of the presentation and then loop back if anyone's got any problems?
I think so. I think if we can.
Okay, so do you want to go ahead with the international approach?
Yeah, I'll have a look. I wonder if I will try here.
So I'm currently sharing my screen.
So if you take yours off,
okay,
I'll see if I can share mine, and then you can tell me from your end. Sorry, guys.
I may have to actually share a specific window now to Okay, I've stopped sharing. You should be good to go to share now.
Okay. So if I do this, hopefully you can see international qualifications approach. Or if anyone in the chat can let you know, Mark, so you can let me know.
So yeah, they can see it.
Good. Okay, so we'll spend just a couple of minutes on this international qualifications. As you know, the approach is going to mirror the UK as closely as possible. So the student grades are going to be derived by the teacher and centre, with a variety of evidence to be collated to inform that grade using the basket of evidence. And again, there will be the three steps.
Throw in that people need to open up the enlarge the media window is where it will be showing when we do a screen share.
Brilliant, thank you. So the three-step QA process will be the same, and guidance and support, of course, will be supplied by us. The guidance has been amended for the international qualifications and will reflect the differences from the UK qualifications. So the difference between the international approach and UK is that unseen Pearson test materials will be made available. The question papers prepared for the summer 2021 are being made available. I believe the window has opened from today. These are to be used according to the unseen assessment schedule on the website. The marking service offered will mark but will not issue grades. That needs to be part of the centre policy. The awarding of grades for international A-level are to be at unit level. So the timelines, I know we've spoken about the timelines, and I just want to look forward to now. So the 26th of April is the entry deadline for your private candidates. And of course, that unseen assessment schedule has opened. So we're talking international qualifications here. So the unseen assessment schedule is open today and will close on the 14th of May. On the 4th of May, the additional assessment support will be released for international, again, including some skills mapping grids, grade descriptors. We've had a few questions about grade descriptors for international qualifications, and they are mainly based on the UK descriptors. So if you are requiring those imminently, then please do use the UK versions until the international ones are released on the 4th. On the 17th of May, the additional assessment support, the mark schemes, obviously to accompany those, will be released under padlock. And then you can see that the dates after that. The 26th of May is the grade submission window in line with the UK. And then the 1st of June, the deadlines and the results days are exactly the same. So the final slide from us before we talk about some questions is the ongoing support. So as we've mentioned before about the Professional Development Academy, please do sign up to the live events or to look at historic events where the recordings are available. The General Qualifications Bulletin, there is another one coming out this Wednesday. Please sign up to make sure that you're receiving those from our Assessment Director. You can also read previous bulletins which are on that page as well. And of course, as many of you do, keep in contact with us on Twitter by following us at Emporium Maths, where we also try and answer questions as quickly as we can. Mark and I are managing that on a daily basis. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mark, if you just want to kind of have a look in the chat at the moment and see if there's anything kind of important that's coming up, and I'm going to add in some frequently asked questions.
Yeah, that's fine. So what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to go through some of the questions that we've got yet to be answered in the actual Q&A that's come through. How many pieces of evidence do we have to produce? You know, there is no minimum amount of evidence to be produced. Likewise, there is no maximum, and actually not having a maximum is actually less helpful. You know, as long as it actually gives you enough evidence to demonstrate the actual grades themselves, that's where the important bit. So, you know, does the evidence match the actual grade descriptors and the performance of that student? Clearly, you know, it's got to be a range of evidence. And if someone just submits one topic test and says, well, they did very well on this one, clearly that's not going to be a sufficient range of evidence. You know, if you think about in any exam series, we classically assess about 70% of the content anyway. Clearly, your assessments do not need to cover the entirety of the content, and it's just making sure that you've given them a wide enough assessment window and amount of evidence to allow them to demonstrate a performance on a variety of topics. So no, there is no actual minimum. If you think about the kind of level of evidence that we base a grade on in terms of hours of examinations, you know, that should give you some guide. So,
okay, so what we're looking...
Sorry, go on, Nick.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah, what I'm looking at doing is just entering these questions that have come in as common questions, and just because I'm conscious that people are going to kind of add into the chat, I thought we'd kind of go over them as we go. So there is the two questions I've put in there at the moment is, why is there no minimum? We get asked this quite regularly. Why is there no minimum? And the guidance approach is that there should be a consistent approach for all. And obviously many students over the past year, just over a year, have had different learning experiences, where some students may have missed multiple terms of physical learning in comparison where some students may have not. They may have missed minimal and had minimal disruption. So we need to make sure that it's fair for all. So by setting a minimum requirement means that there could be students that don't have any they don't reach the minimum, and so teachers are having to use as much evidence as they can. The other one I've just put in the chat, I'm just noticing it's going a bit busy, is what about the past content being used in the assessment materials? And obviously that's so we can have I think, Mark, you addressed this one earlier about why do you have, the past assessment? What if you've got students that are bright enough that they're going to memorise them all? And as Mark alluded to, there's over, there's hundreds of A-level questions, thousands of GCSE questions, and teachers can choose to use them in any combination, in any order. And if you are, you know, having students in your classes that are fully prepared and they've sat all of those and they recognise them all, then they're going to do pretty well, irrelevant of where they come from. But it also allows us to add some performance data to those questions from the live series, so you can see in comparison how historical, you know, grade 5 students, say, have performed on those sorts of questions. We also had some questions submitted about the quality assurance process, so I hope going through those 3 stages have helped, and the standardisation questions of marking and grading. I know that lots of you are doing some moderation sessions within your departments at the moment, which obviously will be very effective. Mark's been through the appeal process, which is very helpful. Can I just say on the marking moderation, we've got a question from Priya, so that we mentioned marking guidance at the beginning of the session. I cannot see any training materials on applying mark schemes, especially nuances like misreads, ignore subsequent wording, etc. So a good place to start on that one is always the guidance on the front of the examination papers. So, for instance, on the mark schemes. So, for instance, it gives guidance on misreads that don't affect the difficulty of the question, how to deal with those ones. The week after next, we've got 2 sessions coming up that you can book for, one on GCSE marking and one on A-level marking, and also the exemplars from the 2020 series for both GCSE and A-level will pass the examiner's comments on specific questions about why the students got the mark in those questions and why they didn't, that you can use as part of your standardization process. So I understand it's gone on the website today for both the training sessions for the week after next for both GCSE and A-level. Brilliant.
So, Priyesh, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we've got so many questions coming in on the live Q&A chat that I think the team are working on behind the scenes to help answer some of those questions. I just want to go over the evidence. There is a theme of evidence questions coming through from everybody about can we adapt papers? Absolutely, you can. Absolutely. Can you use shadow papers? Absolutely. So that the message here is there is no minimum requirement, no maximum. You can build your baskets of evidence using absolutely anything. I think some people asked earlier as well about the low, medium and high control, and to just clear up the scaling. So a high control piece of evidence will be something that's been sat under strict exam conditions, and a low control would be something where, you know, I would think of setting a piece of homework where a student could do it at home with their textbook, their class book, the internet. That would be low control. And then of course the medium would be somewhere in between, so whether that be an adapted paper or an open book test or something in class. I think so in terms of your evidence, as long as you're describing in your assessment record, absolutely just use whichever evidence you see fit. Mark, do you want to talk about the private tutor? We've had a couple of questions about private tutors and evidence of, you know, if students have been, you know, they've had a private tutor, can the school use that as their evidence?
Okay. This nicely dovetails in. I've got a couple of comments here from Haley Downs that says, has the same exam paper got to be used for evidence for the whole year group? And should a student who received a higher mark get a better grade, even if they hit a higher grade descriptor just in fewer questions? Okay, so one of the key points is, and it dovetails into this idea that, you know, we have been asked, can people submit evidence to a school from private tutors? Well, as part of the process, you're going to have to submit to Jcq about what evidence you have used. And actually, but one of the key principles is that students should, in as far as possible, actually have the same evidence in the same cohort, and that if there is an exception through someone's being absent, it needs to be justified. So you can't just justify, oh, I'm going to accept a bit of evidence from a private tutor here. And unfortunately, the questions are flagging by very quickly. So in terms of in terms of a student getting a higher mark but just on fewer questions, well, if that's that they're doing different evidence, they should be doing, in as far as possible, different amounts of evidence. But also you could look at in terms of have they answered fewer questions. There is guidance in the marking descriptors about whether they're working consistently is one of the key words, or broadly consistently in answering and justifying their working. So if they're just nailing it on just one assessment and actually they've flunked it on the other ones, then no, that is not consistent, and that needs to be taken into account in the marking. Nick, have you had a chance to pick up on a few?
Yes, so again, the questions are coming in about how many pieces of evidence and how do we submit this. So I just want to just inform people that we're waiting for confirmation on how the evidence will be submitted and the retention of evidence. So if you are one of the centres that are asked to submit your basket of evidence to the exam boards, then the process is going to be confirmed. We're hoping this week, if not next week. Some people are asking if it's going to be CSV files or scanned documents. At the moment, we don't know the answer to that, but as soon as we do, then we will, of course, communicate that with you. But scanned pieces of work, I know some people have physical work from students from home or lockdown, and that's absolutely fine. You know, scanned evidence is absolutely, acceptable. I'm just looking at, I think it just mirrors what you've just said, Mark. If all of the content has been taught and you've got maybe 3 papers worth, do you just pick the best one? And as Mark just said, not really, because that wouldn't be consistent. You have to look at the evidence as a collective and use your teacher judgment as to which grade would be best.
I should say on that one, it's in terms of evidence, it's the more recent evidence that carries more weight than, say, an assessment that the students have done 6 months ago. And I understand some schools are getting pressure to just test again, and that isn't the principle of this. We should be preparing students for their further studies. And if you think about the volume of assessment that we use to gather evidence for a GCSE A level, the amount of hours for the exam series, if you're going way beyond that, or if your SMT are going way beyond that, I would be potentially flagging that up. If 6 hours is of 4.5 hours is appropriate for an assessment, and they're asking you to do test again and again and again, I'd be flagging that up as somewhat inappropriate. And it may actually get flagged up in your centre level policy if you're actually putting them through 20 different papers and looking for the best grade above them. That might actually flag up in the process.
Yeah, we've had another question about a balance of the levels of control. No, it's entirely up to you what type of controlled assessment you're taking on. That's that you don't have to have a mixture of high and medium and low, just as your approach is outlined in your assessment record. That's absolutely fine.
I'm just looking at one from Lydia while Nick, you have a quick look. So our grading according to rank order. So, it is potentially a way to consider, but, we spoke to Mark Howlett, the head of assessment, about this one the other day, that, it's that having that confidence that whatever grade you ascribe to students, that they actually do broadly have display evidence of that grade, rather than just placing them in a rank order and working on that one. So they do have to be displaying evidence of working at or in that grade.
Yeah, good. We've got quite a few questions about how to use the performance data and grade descriptors enabled to do the grading. I think the best approach here is to go onto the Professional Development Academy and watch there's an hour's video from Mark Howlett, as Mark just mentioned, our head of assessment, and he goes through all of the grading. That's hoping to be uploaded any day now, hoping it goes up today. But one of the previous questions that we had about if I just find the one that was submitted yesterday, how do we use the performance data to derive a grade for our student? So the best way to derive grades is going to be use the grading exemplification to compare your student's performance rather than the performance data itself, because the performance data for me would be something that I would apply at the end as a final checkpoint to see whether that student was fitting at that performance grade. Looking at performance data beforehand, I think is kind of a big task, really. The grade descriptors, I think, again, they are a checkpoint at the end. If you're actually before and at the end, I don't know if you agree with this, Mark, but I would look at, once I've taught a student for a couple of years and you get the idea, with using some evidence that, you know, they're around a grade 6 or a grade 7, I would then have a look at the grade descriptor and think, okay, whereabouts do I need to just evidence a little bit more? Or do they need more processing? Do they need more application evidence? And then I would probably use maybe a themed paper or one of the AAM topic tests just to evidence that that student could approach questions. I don't know if that's the same for you, Mark.
I think it's slightly different for A-level. I mean, we're only talking about teaching them for 2 years. I think it's a little bit different for A-level. I'm just going to answer Andy Mashin's comments that can we provide a list of topics that are being tested in assessment to narrow down the students' focus in revision. I think that's slightly circumspect. If you narrow it down too tightly, you know, you've got to ask the question: would we do that in an external assessment? No, we wouldn't. But I think if you're telling the students what is the common body of knowledge that they have all studied, that they would all be potentially tested on, and that is a wide enough body of knowledge to assess them on, then for questions to be selected from, then I don't see an issue with that. But if you're literally telling them what's in the assessment, then I'd say no, that's circumspect.
I'm just going to answer Samantha's question. I'm conscious of time, everybody, and obviously, you know, we anticipated that these questions will come up. Mark, there's a couple of questions specific to A-level about Pure Math 3 and Pure Math 4. If you could just jump in after I finish with Samantha's.
I'll have a look at those.
Thank you. So Samantha is talking about the grade descriptors are quite generic. Are there any documents which link to the grades? Unfortunately, there aren't, but the historic data and performance data. So if you have found, like you said, Samantha, you know, basic angle facts grade 1. So if you have a look from before, you know, find a previous question, you know, in November 20 or something like that, and just have a look at the performance data and how a grade 1 student would have approach that. The other advice I can give is using the textbooks. I used to use the little wheel of progress on the side. In the old specification, they used to have grade indicators down the side of the textbook, which was removed for the 2015 spec. But I used to use the wheel progress, and there were 12 steps of progress there. And I used to think, right, if that wheel was completely full, then I know that a grade 9 student should be able to attack these questions, and I would use that as a guidance. But no, there aren't any documents that link topics to grades.
Okay. I will just respond to a couple of that one you mentioned. I'm going to reply to them directly because it was an international. Can we use grade boundaries rather than grade descriptors? You know, the situation is not mandated. If you're putting through students through effectively an entire exam series or something that's very close to an exam series, you know, there's nothing wrong with using that rather than the grade descriptors. The situation is not mandated to you this year. So yes is the answer to that one. You know, you just got to make sure that your students are made well aware and well communicated with of how that is being managed. And I believe also that answers Joelle's question about if we use an whole paper, can we just use the grade boundaries that apply to the original series? Yeah, there is no issue with that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Do we need to annotate evidence to show where it meets the descriptor? That's a very good question. Nick, have you got a thought on that one, or have I just thrown you a very difficult question?
Oh, again, I was just answering another one. What was the question?
So it's from Alexandra, do we need to annotate evidence to show where it meets the grade descriptor? As a class teacher, I may, but I think that's going to create a hell of a lot of work for teachers when they're already under pressure at the moment. I think that's a definite question for the either their head of department or their senior team as to whether they are stating that they are going to annotate. If I was back in the classroom and leading my team, I would not be asking as it being compulsory to evidence and having annotations. But that's definitely a centre policy on how they approach that. And if the centre agrees that they would like everything annotated, then they're going to have to follow that, I'm afraid. Okay, I'm just on Mariam's question that our centre is making further maths students sit 7 exams, full exams. Is that appropriate? That's something you are going to have to take up with your actual centre about why they're doing that, why they think it's appropriate to do that. And it's something that actually some parents may actually have an issue with, that if they're taking 7 full exams, their children might actually be quite exhausted. So it's one that, you know, it is a centre level decision. Some would preempt that some parents might actually have an issue with that it might potentially cause a loss of performance if students are actually too tired. They might be making a run for their own back later on. Can we use international A-level questions to assess A-level content? If you feel that they are similar enough, maybe you're just swapping a question out of an assessment rather than just using wholesale an international A-level paper. That would probably be, you'd have to have some justification about how you arrived at grades. But if you're swapping questions in for something that is broadly similar, then swapping questions in and out would probably be considered to be appropriate. Can the research classes take different assessments than the year 11? If you've got a large enough cohort of your research students that you can actually kind of standardize on those ones alone, then it might be appropriate for them to take different assessments. So, because it is a different cohort, it might actually be easier for them to take a similar assessment to the ones who were taken in year 11 to make your standardization process easier. So in principle, yes, they could, but you might be making life a little bit more difficult for yourself. I'm just going to mark that one as answered. For a broad coverage, what percentage of content is specified? Like if you've got students that have got, covered an absolute very minimum of the syllabus, then the general advice is do contact us, do speak to us about that one. We'll look at those extreme cases. But if you think of it in an exam series, we classically cover about 70% of the content anyway. That should give you a rough idea of what kind of thing could be considered appropriate. But in the extreme cases, do contact us. The last one from Pooja, is blind marking a good idea? I know some centres that are doing it on the grounds that, I think they're putting it in their policy that we're removing any hint of bias by actually anonymising scripts, swapping them over, and we're just marking on the face of it. And it's a nice way to say, they said to me, it's a nice way to say that we've eliminated any bias in the marking process.
I think I'm just looking down the list now, and there's a lot of questions from earlier on. I think we've probably just answered if we've used. How would you best evidence a grade 9? I would make sure that I've looked at that grade 8 grade descriptor. And because the grade descriptors on Jcq website will give you all of the overview for a grade 8 student, with the additional support at grade 9 to show that a student can fluently answer across those skills. So I would definitely have a look at the Jcq guidance for the grade 9. I think we've got another one about the A-star, which you've already answered, Mark. I'm just conscious. I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat, and I'm just going to quickly look down our submitted questions to see if there's
pick up a few.
Anything else.
So Ian Clark says, how do you suggest we get from marked papers to grades? As people have suggested, if you're using something that's approximate to an entire exam series, you can, to a degree, adapt grade boundaries like there, or you can use the marking exemplars that are actually available on our website with the grade descriptors. I really suggest you have a good look at those about how they go through the process of evidencing from a student script. It's all in those guidance documents that are available on the website. So
brilliant. So sorry, Mark. I've just had a couple of general questions about the assessment record. Somebody was asking about like AO4. I just want to make it clear that on that assessment record, it mentions the assessments. They're not alluding to assessment objectives. What the assessment record has done is just said assessment piece 1, assessment piece 2, down to 4, and you can add or remove where appropriate. So it's not referring to an assessment objective 4, just an assessment piece number 4, if you like. And also with regards to support on completing the top part of that assessment record, your exams officer will be able to complete that for you, and making sure that that is consistent across the centre. They will want to make sure that all of the information and details that you're putting on that form is, kind of in line with what English and science and everyone else is doing. And the parental pressure, some of you mentioning about what to do with parents that are putting on pressure for additional work or etc. I would, as a head of maths, I would be referring up my chain of command to senior management if I was feeling that a parent was applying some pressure on evidence to be used for a particular student, because everything has to be consistent and fair for everybody. So if that parent is requesting something for their child, we need to make sure that that's, or you need to make sure that that's appropriate for all of your students. So if you are worried about parental pressure or any other pressure from external, then I would refer that to your senior leadership team.
Okay. Do you want me to pick up a few?
Yes, please.
I've got Elizabeth said, we're told not to use any evidence when we are not confident we're not confident it's the student's work. What if we are not confident but can't prove it? Won't it be a problem in appeals if we don't use this evidence? I think that's an absolute thorny one that you're going to actually have to take back to your senior management team and just justify. In theory, you're supposed to use the same evidence as far as possible amongst all your students. And I think that's a conversation that you're actually going to have to get in with your senior management there. How much emphasis is to be placed on grade descriptors over boundaries? I think it decides which kind of direction you are going into on that one, and that's kind of for your centre to decide. Clearly, if you're putting together a paper with very low grade boundaries, with grade boundaries, you're going to have to justify what you have done and say why one thing takes precedence over another. But clearly, evidence is going to be looked at in the quality assurance process. If you're putting together grade boundaries that provide a grade distribution that's entirely different to previous years, then that would be picked up in the quality assurance process. So if students need help with released materials, how much help can we give? I think that's a very tricky one. That and if you're not using those the released assessment material, the additional assessment materials, then in some ways, that could be seen as revision. So that's fine. If you're actually going to be using those, then it's for the students to use them as their own revision materials. I think if you're using them as part of your internal assessment, I think the key thing is consistency across your students. That if you've just given one student help on a particular topic, but not others, then that could be perceived as bias. So I think that's a very difficult one, and I think it's consistency across your cohort that is probably the most important thing on that one. Can you award an A-star to students that have not covered the whole syllabus? Clearly, extreme case, they've covered 25% of the syllabus, then no. But if they have covered, the overwhelming proportion of the syllabus, then potentially yes, as long as you kind of are looking at those grade descriptors on the extra exemplification on the Jcq website about outstanding performance in the content that they have covered. Nick, do you want to pick up a couple while I'm just looking for a couple more?
Yeah, I'm just looking about, I think it's Jonathan's comment about giving too much detail. You said about giving too much detail to pupils about content, but you are sharing additional assessment materials for GCSE, and then we can use these same questions and tests to assess these pupils. I wonder if, I'm just not too sure about what you're asking there, Jonathan. But yes, yes, you can use them. You can use the additional assessment materials, but of course you can choose not to. And if you want to put something else in the chat about, whether or not we've answered your question there or not. Where can we find the objectives for the subject assessment record? The list of assessment objectives will be in the course specification, Louise. You can just download that either from the Emporium or from the website. I think I've just shared my screen and then unshared the screen to see if that's got rid of that kind of media issue. I think there was a bit of a freeze happening there. How can you submit evidence for students that have learnt remotely all the time? We cannot confirm any evidence is genuine. If you are concerned, any work that they've completed, this is for Catherine, any work that they've completed at home, I would consider as low control. And of course, you can submit that if they've sent the work to you but again, you'll just have to confirm in your assessment record and send to policy that that material is of low control.
And it's one that would need to be recorded as to why that student's evidence, because I'm presuming this is a small number of students,
Yes.
that why that student's evidence is different from the others.
Yeah. We've got a question from Samshina who says, are we allowed to use the January 2021 grade boundary? It depends on what you're using that for. It depends on, how you're applying that one.
I'm just looking at Jeff's, who says, is there any reason why we cannot use October 2020 papers as practice if they aren't being used specifically for the assessment material? There's no reason why you can't. We would just, the idea is that you are keeping evidence for yourselves as a record. So, although you can rely on evidence from earlier in the term before this process kicked off, you do not necessarily need to have that evidence because you didn't know you might need to keep it. But anything used for this series, then by all means you need to keep it. But if you're using the 2020, just be aware, please be sensitive that a lot of other people will be using 2020 papers as their assessments. So we'd ask you to try and keep those, anonymized or mark them up as mock paper, because if students are going to be taking them home, it just makes life more difficult for everybody else.
Okay, just a question. I think if we take two more, Mark.
Yep.
This one here about that, that in a normal year you might have students that may have achieved better grades because they would have covered all of the content, and of course that's completely understandable, but we are just assessing what the students have been taught this year, and the main emphasis is that those students are ready for their next steps. Are they ready to take on their next courses? I think we have we've covered the whole curriculum, but we just haven't had time to get the depth required to meet the grade descriptors due to the closures. Students have had less time, so are not as able in previous years, so cannot be given the grades that they would otherwise have reached. And this is the case across everywhere. So no one is, this whole process is to try and ensure that students are not at a disadvantage or at an advantage, and that it's fair for everybody. I'll take one more after this, Mark, if you want to take.
Yeah, I'll take
the next one.
Kathy's. So Kathy said, I still don't understand why Mark said that you should not give them a focus short revision list, but the paper questions available. Isn't that going even further than a revision checklist? Yes, but we're not saying if you were to use the additional assessment materials that you had to use all the additional assessment materials is the key point. So if you're just telling them that you're going to use assessments 1, 3, and 5, then you're literally telling them what is on there. And because they are broken down by topic, they could go out there and literally go and do those papers because they're gathered together by the subject topics. So, I mean, by all means, you should tell them if there's out of 20 of them that you're going to sample from 17 of them, that's fine. But if you're just telling them which specific actual very small specific topics, then that's probably not fair on them and not fair on other conducts.
I think I'll take one more. We've had a look. Yes, we've had multiple referrals from worked and full work solutions on YouTube and Instagram, and we thank you for sending all of those in to us via the Twitter page. As soon as we're made aware of those, we send those to the copyright team. So yeah, absolutely. And finally, Shabnez, just if you're applying the November 2020 grade boundaries, then that would obviously be applicable to the November 2020 papers. So yeah, absolutely, you can use those. Mark, I think that's it. I think we are down to 0 on the questions. Thanks to the team behind the scenes. Thank you. That's an amazing job and a really busy session. Mark, is there anything you want to finish up with?
No, I was going to say that if you do have anything else, follow us on Twitter. DMs on Twitter is absolutely fine. It's quite a nice way. If you've got a very specific question, we can answer that one specifically for you. And then if it's something we think everyone would know, we'd broadcast the answer to the world. And we just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's attended tonight. And where with Nick and I being in the classroom to just before Christmas, we're aware it's stressful. We're right there with you on this one, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We're here to help you as much as we can. And as I said earlier at the beginning of the session, we are on Twitter all day, every day. And it's a lot quicker for us to get back to you. And we tend to get back to you within the hour. So as Mark said, if you think it's something that everyone else would appreciate or have that same question, then just tweet us at Emporium Maths, or you can add it as a DM if you think it's something you just want, you know, kind of private answer to. That's absolutely fine. But yes, I think for now, we've all worked really hard, you guys as well. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I'll hand over to the technical support team who will just wrap the session up for you.